All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's Senate Forum. We really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to try to ask them in the chat, and we'll try to ask them. We know it's on YouTube, but we'll do our best. So we really do appreciate it. But yeah, feel free to have a conversation in the chat and join into the conversation. We want to see a robust conversation about what's been talked about on this forum. And yeah, if you want to learn more about us, go to ourwisconsinrevolution.com or ourwisconsinrev.com. And yeah, let's go ahead and get it started. So my name is Andre Walton. I am the executive director of Our Wisconsin Revolution. We are a progressive organization fighting for a government that works for all of us and not just those with money and power. We are really thrilled that you can join us today on this Friday evening for the Senate Forum. Here at Our Wisconsin Revolution, we believe that there are three major crises that we face today: a social crisis in which racism and bigotry are tearing our society apart, an economic crisis where housing is unaffordable, wages are stagnant, and healthcare is out of reach for millions of Americans. And lastly, we face an environmental crisis that is threatening life on this planet as we know it. In order to face these crises head on, we need a progressive champion who is willing to stand up to the fossil fuel industries, Democratic leadership, and the major financial industries that control our halls of Congress. It's not enough to simply support the issues. We need someone who is willing to fight for the progressive agenda no matter what is thrown their way. We hope on this forum that we can find that progressive champion. Without further ado, let's get started. I want to start by quickly going over the forum rules. So each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the first 6 questions. When you have 15 seconds left, you will be warned in the chat. If you go over time, I will stop you. This is not personal. We're just sticking to a strict time span. For the last 2 questions, you will have 60 seconds to respond, and the same rules applies with warnings in the chat. We have 8 total questions. We have 3 specifically from OWR members and / board members. And we have one of our board members on here to ask that question directly. So we are looking forward to getting those questions asked as well. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves and 2 minutes for closing remarks. The order by which the candidates are asked questions are at random, so there's no favoritism here. Now let's get into the candidate introductions. First candidate to introduce themselves will be Stephen Alakar.
Well, thank you, Andre, for your leadership of this movement here in Wisconsin. Thank you to everyone that's been part of our Wisconsin Revolution, that's been pushing the revolution here in Wisconsin. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. It's truly an honor. I'm an unusual candidate to be running for the U.S. Senate in the sense that I'm the son of Indian immigrants. And when I was growing up in suburban Milwaukee, I would have never thought politics would be in my future. But I think having that outsider mentality became instrumental to the kind of politics that I believe. I'm an inclusive populist. And part of that realization of being an inclusive populist comes from my background growing up here, building diverse coalitions to get things done and realizing that's how our democracy functions at its best. But I also spent the last decade founding and running the Millennial Action Project, which grew to become the nation's largest nonpartisan organization of young elected leaders, training about 2,000 leaders at the congressional state level. So I also have the longest and most extensive federal legislative experience in this race. And from that time, I saw all of the BS in our politics, and I look forward to sharing more about the corruption in our politics and why we need to change the business model of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. The next candidate we have introducing themselves is Jeff Rumbaugh.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Jeff Rumbaugh, candidate for U.S. Senate. I'm proud to be here. Thank you to OWR for inviting myself and the other candidates. For over 20 years now, I have been serving Wisconsin's developmentally disabled community with compassion and care. And during this time, I have found out what it's like to be a member of the United States who is ostracized from our social contract known as the U.S. Constitution. After standing with the disabled for so long, I have come to acknowledge what it's like to be a person of color, LGBTQ, and other groups who have been pushed aside in the wake of our recent government. I ask for your support, and it's time for a new type of leader who wants to talk about real issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate you joining us for this forum. The next candidate that will introduce themselves is Tom Nelson. You have 1 minute.
All right, thanks, Andre, and thanks, REV, for hosting this forum. You know, one of the top questions, and probably this is on your mind, is simply who can beat Ron Johnson? I'm the only candidate from a red part of the state here in Northeast Wisconsin who has won election, re-election 6 times, 3 as a legislator and 3 as an executive. I can get good legislation passed, and I can get the government to work. I'm also the only candidate who wrote a book because one of the high points my public service was working with the local steelworkers union to help save a mill. We got management together, labor together, local business. We took on the odds. We beat the odds, much in the vein of a Bernie Sanders, of whom I was proud to be a delegate. I agree with our revolution that we have some bread and butter issues that ought to be cornerstones of this campaign. We'll talk more about that, but big issues for me that I fully support and have campaigned on are Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, labor rights, and getting rid of line 3 and line 5. And I look forward to discussion this evening.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate that. Our next candidate who will be speaking is Mr. Mandela Barnes. You have 1 minute.
All right, thank you so much. Really happy to join you all tonight. And I like to start out by saying my path here is different than most. I was born and raised in the city of Milwaukee. My mother is a public school teacher. My dad worked on the assembly line, and those jobs were their ticket to the middle class. And they are exactly the reason why I'm able to stand here today as your lieutenant governor and as a candidate for the U.S. Senate. But for so many people across this state, those same pathways no longer exist. I'm running for the Senate to rebuild the middle class, to create the opportunities for everyone in this state, regardless of what zip code they come from, and to tackle the largest problems we face, like the assault on voting rights and the threat of climate change. I'm running for the U.S. Senate to make sure that my story is no longer the exception. I'm running for the Senate to make the American dream an American reality for everyone.
Thank you, Mandela. Really appreciate that. Our next candidate that will be introducing themselves is Adam Murphy. You have 1 minute.
Hi there. So, I had hoped to have y'all from my kitchen tonight, but that idea kind of got shot down. So I'm here in my office and, I could rattle off my history and my resume. I started a software company 18 years ago. I earned degrees in economics and political science just last year, just in order to run for office. Or, I'm a certified yoga instructor and certified scuba diver. But none of that matters unless it matters to you. And that's the whole point of what my campaign is about. It's listening, it's learning, and it's sharing with and from you. Taking mountains and mountains of time to talk with voters instead of at voters. Because I believe we're actually at a tipping point in politics, both from a social standpoint and a partisan standpoint. And we have the opportunity for incredible progress if we're willing to take that risk. And I hope you'll join me on this adventure.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate it. Our next candidate introducing themselves is Peter Picarski. You have 1 minute. Peter, you have
You
1
guys
minute.
have stopped the video.
No, we did not.
Okay, that's what the message said. All right, fine. Thank you very much, Andre. My name is Peter Pakarski. I want to point out that unless we protect the right of everybody to vote and have that vote counted as cast to protect our democracy, we will not get what our revolution wants in the area of social issues, economics, and environmental issues. When talking, the Senate candidates say we should protect our democracy by filing a suit to maintain the secret ballot required by the Wisconsin Constitution. I acted to prevent a version of what happened in Florida in 2000 from happening here in 2024 or 2022. I invited all the candidates to join with me. No one did. Three of the candidates have run statewide before and did nothing to stop this threat to our democracy. Whether they did not recognize the threat or knew about it and chose to risk our democracy and your future is for them to say over the course of the next 5 months between now and the primary. I acted the first time I had standing as a candidate. The complaint is on the campaign website, Pakarski, FOR, at the legal notices tab. The invitation to everyone else is on our Twitter feed at Pakarski, FORWI. I'll be happy to speak with you about this. Hit the website, give us your comments, and I look forward to discussing it both this evening and throughout the rest of this campaign as we try to
Peter.
protect our democracy. Thanks,
you, Peter. Appreciate it. And our next candidate is Daryl Williams. You have 1 minute.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Daryl Williams, and I hail from the cotton fields of Abbeville, Mississippi. I came here to Wisconsin over 25 years ago as a teacher, became a principal and educator for over 26 years. I was humbled to be selected as National Principal of the Year and the Interim Superintendent of Schools in Beloit, Wisconsin. I joined the military when I was 16 years old. Proudly served our country for 29 years and served two tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Was humbled to be to receive the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. And I was very humble to serve you, the people of the state of Wisconsin, as the administrator of Wisconsin Emergency Management, appointed by Governor Tony Evers. I'm running for the U.S. Senate for every veteran who has served. Now it's time for us to serve them. I'm running for every police officer who wants support but believes that we have to restore the trust and confidence within our community. We have many issues that we'll discuss tonight, but in a nutshell, Wisconsinites, I'm running for you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We really appreciate it. Thank you, candidates, for those brief introductions. We'll get more into it later as we go on. So let's go ahead and get to where the viewers really want to know about, and that's the question and what your stance is on the policy stances. So the first question we have is about campaign finance. So a 2014 Princeton study indicated that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have a substantial independent impact on U.S. government policy, while the average citizen and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence over our government. This question has two parts. One, will your campaign refuse corporate PAC money? And two, what will you do to combat the influence that big money has on our electoral system? The first candidate to answer this question will be Daryl Williams. You have 90 seconds. Daryl, you're first. You have 90 seconds to answer the question.
Got it. And thank you again. Yes, I think one of the things that we have to do is refuse big money from these larger corporations. I think this is one of the main reasons why our country is in trouble. A lot of times people have been paid and bought for by big business, and whenever they get inside of these elected positions, they don't do what they say that they were going to do. I think in many cases, we have seen where people have said one thing while they were running for election, and they say one thing in front of the camera, but behind the scenes and in closed sessions, they do something totally different. And I think a good example of that is what we see where people, the right to vote with the John Lewis Voting Act. There's no reason in the world why that the Voting Rights Act should not be passed at this point in time. Clearly, somebody has cut some deals behind the scenes at some point in time, and I would be one because I'm not paid and bought for like you may have some other candidates. And one of the things that we also have to realize is that, and one of the things my campaign runs on is that every person, whether you have $1 million or a dime, every vote counts. And every person in rural Wisconsin wants their voice to be heard. It shouldn't necessarily matter that a person has $1 million or $20 million inside of their account. We all want what's best for America. And that's what my campaign is about. And that's why I decided to run. I'm running for the people of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Daryl. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. You have 90 seconds.
Thanks very much, Andre. As I understand it, there are two questions. Am I taking corporate PAC money? No, I am not taking and will not take corporate PAC money during this campaign or while I am a United States Senator. Second, the question is, what are we going to do about it? What legislation, what steps would you take? I can think of a number of things. One, stop stock trading by members of Congress. Two, you could eliminate the tax deduction for lobbying of any type. It's a protected First Amendment activity. That does not mean that we have to give corporations a tax deduction for spending millions of dollars to try and influence the legislators, and to make campaign contributions. The campaign contributions aren't deductible, but the enormous amount of money spent lobbying the legislators and the executive branch is. We can end that with enough support in the Congress. And I might add, from the president who has to sign it. Another thing, the other main thing is to put the correct people, progressive Democrats, on the United States Supreme Court. Very little will happen until that is done. And the only way to do that is to elect progressive Democrats, protect the elections, make sure that everybody's vote is counted as cast, put them in office, and have them nominate and confirm progressive Democrats who follow the law in this country. I think, yeah, time's up. Thank you very
Peter.
much. Sure.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy. You have 90 seconds.
So we've got a couple different things going on here that I want to address. First of all, corporate PACs. I think it's really important that people understand what corporate PACs can actually do and how much they can donate. And the most that they can donate to any U.S. Senate campaign is $5,000. No offense, I can't be bought for $5,000. I think it's kind of ridiculous, actually, that so many of the candidates focus on that. When we get into lobbying, that's a different animal, and I'll talk about that. But corporate PACs can't donate that much to our actual campaigns. And corporations cannot donate directly to us, nor can unions. So there's a perception of how money works in politics that I think is perhaps a little bit off. When it comes to lobbying, though, and that's you mentioned policy, right? And that's a much more important aspect where the money actually does matter, as you said. So lobbyists, again, are interesting. There are times when lobbyists are beneficial. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but when we're talking about lobbying for air quality, water quality, when we're talking about lobbying for immigrants, when we're talking about lobbying for disability rights, those are important lobbyists. So what I'll offer is, I probably am the only one that called Andre about the surveys that you guys sent out. That's what I actually do when people approach me for comments and that sort of thing for endorsements, is I actually call them. I actually ask them questions. I actually get involved with them. And I ask that they present both sides.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate your answer on that one. Our next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. You have 90 seconds.
All right, thank you so much. Now, bottom line is that lobbyists and wealthy donors have all the power and all the influence in Washington. And politicians listen to them instead of regular people. And so I've pledged to not accept contributions from corporate PACs, and I always put everyday people in the state of Wisconsin first. And that's why I made my campaign's very first policy plan on restoring accountability in government. And I was also the first candidate to release a plan calling for campaign finance reform and ending big money in politics. Now, my plan would overturn Citizens United and pass legislation like the Disclose Act and the Honest Ads Act. And then calls for abolishing the filibuster so we can actually pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. It also calls for ending gerrymander and bans members of Congress from trading stocks. Now, in the Senate, I'll focus on passing those reforms to stop politicians like Ron Johnson, who get millions in corporate PAC money, and also turn around and vote against middle-class families right here in Wisconsin and think no one will hold them accountable. Now, my work on campaign finance reform is why I've been endorsed by groups like End Citizens United, who originated the No Corporate PAC pledge. This is the work that I'm committed to, and it's the work I'm looking forward to being involved in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Mandela. Appreciate the answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson.
Great. Thanks, Andre. Appreciate the question. You know, let's not forget whose seat this is. And this is not Ron Johnson, certainly not Bob Castens. This is the seat of Russ Feingold. What was his top issue? His top issue was campaign finance, and it was his top issue because he laid out a very clear position on how all issues are connected to campaign finance. The reason why our system doesn't work is because all the wealth and all the power is concentrated in just a couple of hands. The millionaires and the billionaires control the process. Now, this country goes across the world promoting democracy. The world, not just the citizens, look to America to be able to have the kind of democracy that ought to thrive, and we are doing a really crummy job. I support the PRO Act. I'm sorry, well, I do support the PRO Act. I support the For the People Act, that we can start addressing not just money in politics, but going to the heart of one of the biggest insidious problems here in Wisconsin, and that is gerrymandering. No other state would benefit more than Wisconsin by passing the For the People Act and working on getting rid of gerrymandering. I led the charge to ban stock trading among members of Congress. I'm not taking any corporate PAC, and I believe I might be the only candidate that has taken the no fossil fuel pledge, because it is fossil fuel interests that not only control the system, but has led to devastating results, including not being able to pass a Green New Deal and taking real action on climate change. I'm not just talking about Republicans like Ron Johnson. I'm talking about Democrats, and I am talking about Republicans. You know, if I get elected, I will be one of the lonely 1/3 of the U.S. Senate who's not a millionaire and a billionaire. That goes to show just how messed up the system is.
Thanks, Tom. Time's up. Appreciate your answer on that. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rumbaugh. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. First of all, ours is a grassroots campaign, and we will not be accepting money from PACs or super PACs. I want to be clear that money in politics is corrosive, and it has become such a force in our country that it is destroying our democracy. Money is not about free speech. It's simply not. And we need to end Citizens United. We need to keep corporations from donating to campaigns and exercising their influence and perpetuating the wealth gap in this country, which is staggering. There is very little transparency regarding campaign finance, and we need to be more hawkish about that. And we need to remind ourselves that politicians are spending a lot of their time going around raising money when they could be working on their own position and their own office that they were publicly elected for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate that answer. Our next candidate is Stephen Alcar. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. The signature issue of our campaign is changing the business model of politics and taking on the political industrial complex. And that's why, inspired by Bernie Sanders' commitment in 2016, when he was asked his first piece of legislation would be campaign finance reform, I also made a pledge when I announced our campaign that my first bill in the U.S. Senate will be getting big money out of politics. Now, why is money at the root of this flawed business model in politics? Well, I saw this firsthand working with members of Congress where they're not doing their job. I remember one time getting coffee with a member of Congress off campus from the Hill in the middle of the afternoon, thinking they would be going back to Congress afterwards, but that's not what happens. They were going across the street to dial for dollars from their big money special interests. And that is the culture in Washington, where members of Congress will spend often a majority of their time on fundraising and not doing their taxpayer-funded job to be a legislator. The second thing is corruption. And Ron Johnson knows too much about corruption in politics because he's been an instigator of it. I think we need to get big money out of politics so that we can actually pass climate change legislation, student debt reform, and more. And then the final thing is we need money in politics reform so working class people can be able to run for office. Right now, Congress is basically an argument between millionaires and billionaires, and I think that's wrong. So I've taken the pledge not to accept corporate PAC money, as well as the pledge not to accept fossil fuel money, and I will be the leader on this issue in Congress.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that answer. So the next question we have revolves around foreign policy. So followers of U.S. politics know that spending bills and progressive proposals are always met with the question, how are you going to pay for that? Yet when the military budget is increased annually as a matter of course, which it has recently been $767 billion, which is over $7 trillion over 10 years, that question is almost never raised by Democrats or Republicans. It's no secret that the military-industrial complex heavily influences both parties. The question is, do you think it is right to continually expand our military budget while our infrastructure, education, life expectancy falter, and infant mortality, depression, and suicide are on the rise? And so that's the first question. Do you think it's right? And the second question is, will you pledge to vote against raising the military budget further until we address some of those issues? The first person to answer this question is Adam Murphy. You have 90 seconds.
There we go. Gotta hit the right button. All right. So do I think it's right? No. We spend more than the next, 10, 12 countries combined, 16, depending on how much they're spending and we're spending. China's the closest to us, and I think we spend 3 or 4 times what China does, although their spending is increasing dramatically. But we've put ourselves into being the role of the world police. The question becomes, is that the role that we're comfortable in? Is that the role that we want to stay in? I think right now we're seeing the reason why we are, obviously with what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine. And so when we start to talk budgeting and we start to talk pledging, the only pledge that I think makes sense for a candidate is to pledge to review the situation at the time. Right now, we're looking at a situation where we are probably going to spend billions, if not potentially hundreds of billions, to save the Ukraine. That's not something that we can necessarily budget for. That's something that Congress is going to have to deal with. So do I think that the overall budget is too high? Yes. I also think it's important to understand what's in it. Let's take, for example, that $767 million, the Veterans Administration budget comes out of that. We all believe that we should do better by our veterans. I'm pretty certain that most everybody on this call would say that. And so I think it's disingenuous to throw out a number, and I mean no offense, and say, yes, I'll absolutely pledge against it. I don't think that makes sense. I think you have to break it down.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I came of age during the time of the Iraq War, and one of the most formative experiences was voicing my opposition to the Iraq War and seeing just the out of control, endless wars that we have. So I'm running as an anti-war candidate and as someone who will take on the military-industrial complex when I get to the U.S. Senate. And this ties back to my core message about money in politics, because the amount of influence that our defense contractors have in distorting our military policies and our international policies is it's gross. That's not how our government should be run, and it's not strategic. We're not preparing ourselves for the 21st century. And when it comes to the budget, a big theme of our campaign is talking about dignity and helping humanity here in America. Well, you look at the priorities of our federal budget, and the vast majority of it is going to things like the military and interest on the debt, and the actual amount that you're investing in the future, things like the environment and infrastructure and medical and science research, is less than 10%. That is not a strategy for our country to win the future, and I will realign those priorities as a U.S. Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. You have 90 seconds.
All right, thanks so much. It's important that we keep our country safe, but there are some big issues we have to look at here, like the amount of defense contractors that just line their pockets without actually providing us with security. And we should be able to find a bipartisan way to fix this. It was actually Republican President Dwight Eisenhower who mentioned what you mentioned in terms of the military industrial complex, who first warned us to make sure that our military budget and our domestic budget work together, not against each other. And right now we spend more per capita on defense than any other country. And at the same time, we aren't addressing the struggles that people have here at home. And we're also not doing enough to fund diplomacy to stop conflicts before they happen in the first place. So I do think that we need to be investing as heavily in things like education and infrastructure and job creation to ensure that we can support our middle class and also create a strong economy that works for everybody so that the American foundation can be strong.
Thank you, Mandela. I really appreciate the answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. You have 90 seconds.
Priorities have to be reallocated. And what I think it is important to remember is the following. From somebody who knew an awful lot about war in the military. He was a Republican president by the name of Dwight David Eisenhower, who said as follows: every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. That was a long time ago. It's much more expensive now. It is 2 electric power plants. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is 50 miles of concrete pavement. We pay for a single fighter plane with, at the time, 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people. This, I repeat, is the best way of life to be found on the road the world has been taking. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging from a cross of iron. Is there no other way the world may live? There most certainly is another way the world may live. And as a United States Senator, I intend to do what I can to lead our country to live in that world. As I said, the priorities have to be reordered. As far as predicting now what's going to be required in the future, that's very difficult and also irresponsible. But to reorder priorities is totally responsible. And as your United States Senator, as somebody who has advised the Chief of Naval Operations and the Director of Naval Intelligence and understands what's going on, I will do whatever I can to reorder our priorities, as I've just mentioned, and in accord with the advice of somebody who knew something about the military, Dwight David Eisenhower.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Our next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. You have 90 seconds.
Thanks for that question. Let me just say that question is not as cut and dry as it seems, but as someone who has served our military for 29 years and served in 2 combat zones, I'm very passionate about making sure that our servicemen and women have what they need to survive. Yes, I know that we need more money for infrastructure. We need more money for research. We need more money for schools. One thing that I didn't hear is that we need more money for these homeless veterans who are sitting on the street that we walk past every day. So we have to make sure that we use some of that funding for them. But one of the things that we have to make sure of is that we protect our borders at all costs. And Homeland Security, freedom is not free. As someone, again, who's been on the front lines for, in 2 combat zones, I was there whenever we had what we call hillbilly armor. There are servicemen and women who were sitting there that didn't have the equipment that we needed. And I think that as a United States Senator, we have to make sure that those who protect us, we protect them at all costs so they can return back to our country and to their families. We say that we love our veterans, but we still have homeless veterans. We say that we love our veterans, but they have a hell of a time getting their benefits that they have earned while they're across seas. So it's time for us not to just sit up here on this call and sit inside these elected positions and talk about it with lip service. It's time for us to put up or shut up and follow up with action. And that's what's going to make the difference. And as your United States Senator, that's exactly what I would do.
Thank you, Daryl. The next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. You have 90 seconds.
Great, thank you. And thanks for asking the question too. We've done a couple of these debates and forums, and despite what's going on in the world right now, we rarely get a question on foreign policy. And of course, one of the biggest components of foreign policy is military policy. If I was a US Senator, I would have voted against the defense bill, because that happened just after discussion about the infrastructure bill and how we couldn't afford the infrastructure bill because it was going to cause inflation and spending was going to get it out of control. Yet if you were to annualize the infrastructure bill relative to the defense bill was like 6 to 7 times more. Imagine that, 6 to 7 times more. Not only is that completely absurd in any terms, in any context, but in the debate about the COVID bills and the debate about the infrastructure bill, which goes to the heart and just shows just how backwards the priority. So you need to have a loud voice and you have to have a consistent voice. And if you look at the defense bill, a big part of it is in procurement. And that's a big problem because let's be very clear, not all, of course, not all calls, but there are a number of projects that are simply jobs programs for random congressional districts around the country, most of them Republican, most of them red. What we need to do with this is there needs to be reform within the Defense Department, especially in the procurement division. The procurement division, there has been complete consolidation among contractors, and so there's very little competition. That also goes to the fact how it is a bloated budget. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rumbaugh. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. I think first we have to remember that we still have nuclear armaments from the Reagan era that are deteriorating and need maintenance. We have enough military right now to handle virtually any conflict that we could face. So no, the defense budget should not be as mammoth as it is. We have other priorities here within our country that need to be addressed to make us a more civil society. America can be better about that. And we're looking at the situation in Ukraine right now and the invasion of Kyiv and everything that is going on there. And we need to remember that we need to work closely with our allies overseas to help maintain peace and stability in the world. So part of our foreign policy is certainly cooperation. We also need to take into consideration China. They have become more militarily active in the South China Sea. They've been building islands to create airstrips, and they have certainly threatened our allies, Japan and Australia. And those are issues that we have to face. So growing our military budget is not something that this campaign approves of. But having said that, spending is far higher than it should be. And the goals of this country cannot be met by increasing the budget of our military. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the answer. So we're next going to move on to the environment. So this was a question that was submitted by our members as well. It starts off with a quote from Ansel Adams. It says, "It is horrifying that we have to fight our own government to save the environment," end of quote. Despite activists sounding the alarm on the dangers that the climate crisis poses, we have seen the Biden administration approving more oil and gas permits than Trump himself. And every attempt to introduce climate legislation has been beaten back by the oil industry and by the oil industry back Democrats and Republicans. As a senator, what would you do differently than others in your party to lead on the climate crisis? And would you support and champion a Green New Deal? The first candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. You have 90 seconds.
Thanks so much. And it's very clearly stated, we need bold and powerful action to address climate change. And of course, I support a Green New Deal that works for Wisconsin. Our priorities have to be curbing greenhouse gas emissions by transitioning to 100% renewable energy as soon as possible and creating jobs with investments in clean energy. Also manufacturing those solar panels and those windmills right here in Wisconsin. Addressing climate change is an economic opportunity for all of us. Now, I'll just tell a quick story about catalytic converters, as I tend to, because in the 1960s, the Clean Air Act passed, which contained new emission standards. Vehicles were required to have catalytic converters, and we needed people to build them. My dad was one of those people, his brother, and thousands of other people across Wisconsin. They got good paying jobs because of the opportunity created by addressing climate change. Now, action like this is still possible, and I've done a lot of this work in Wisconsin as the chair of the governor's task force on climate change. And what I'll do different is take the expertise that I've gotten by working with so many different individuals and organizations, climate activists, scientists, farmers, and labor unions to develop sound policy, the most comprehensive, bold strategy that Wisconsin has ever seen to address climate change. And we're going to take that work all the way to the U.S. Senate to make sure that Wisconsin can reclaim its place as a leader in conservation and a leader in renewable energy, and also a leader in job creation and manufacturing. I look forward to continuing that work in the Senate. Now we'll be a champion.
Thank you, Mandela. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. You have 90 seconds, Peter.
Hello. Andre?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, can you put that question up again, please?
Yes, I will repeat the question. So the question was about the environment and having to do with the Green New Deal. So as a senator, what would you do differently than others in your party to lead on the climate crisis? And would you support and champion a Green New Deal?
Yeah, what I would do differently than others in my party is, for starters, not take money from fossil fuel companies and others who support them. As far as the Green New Deal, I've read the Green New Deal. Too far from the camera. Anyway, the goals it sets forth are things we should try and attain. That is green energy. The text of that Green New Deal raises a lot of questions. I mean, I think they have the right idea. It's going in the right direction. I have an understanding of the technology involved. I have a degree in electrical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and have been studying a number of issues related to this for a very long time, starting with school. So I'm in a position to do differently than just about anybody else in the Democratic caucus in the Senate, to understand the technology involved and ask some questions. I just heard somebody suggest that we go to 100% renewable energy. That's a great idea. I fully support 100% renewable energy. The question I would like to ask is, how are we going to get there? I mean, it's one step at a time. I support taking all of those steps. But I think we've got to be very careful about what we do. So in summary, I'm not taking money from the oil companies or anybody else in that field. To the extent we can, we should see that money is not invested there, as, for example, by the banks who are supported by the deposit insurance provided by the United States government. That means by the people. And secondly, work towards 100% renewable energy to something that looks like a Green New Deal. Whether it has each and everything in there remains to be seen, but I'm here to work for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your answer. Our next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rumbaugh. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. Our campaign believes that environmental justice is occurring here in Wisconsin. Foxconn, for example, cannot be allowed to drain tens of thousands of gallons of water per day from Lake Michigan, treat it, and then return it. But on a broader scale, we believe that at the federal level, we should be charging corporations $50 per metric ton of carbon that is released, and that's in accordance with the World Bank. We also believe in greater subsidies for car dealerships and consumers to sell and buy electric vehicles and also for commercial and residential areas to install charging meters for those vehicles. We need to continue in the long run looking at trains. We need to proliferate the use of trains. And yes, President Biden has given quite a bit of money to Amtrak, but we need to look beyond that. And that is something our campaign is very much in favor of. We are against fracking, and we are glad to see that individuals like Deb Haaland and Charles Sams III, both Native Americans, have been put in positions where they have become stewards of the environment, and rightfully so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the answer. Our next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. Well, taking on climate change and environmental issues is personal for me. It's the issue that first got me into politics. In fact, this goes back to my college days when I was at UW-Madison at the Nelson Institute and helped to create the environmental studies major and was the first environmental studies graduate from UW as a major. So taking on this issue will be a top priority of ours in the U.S. Senate. And I agree with the big picture goals of the Green New Deal, and I want to bring those policies to life. And so the three big priorities we have on this topic is 100% clean electricity standard by 2030, and making sure that the jobs that are created through that are right here in Wisconsin. And the people, especially marginalized communities who've been locked out of the brown economy, are brought into this new green economy that we're building. The second thing is for clean tech entrepreneurs to make sure they're locating here in Wisconsin. And a lot of them reach what is called the valley of death, where a lot of these promising technologies fail because they don't have enough financing. So I do believe the government has a role to help the deployment of these clean technologies. And the third thing is something that only the federal government can do, and that's investing in basic science and research in these breakthrough technologies. I'm proud to be probably the only candidate in this race who's helped to actually pass clean energy innovation legislation. There was a program in Congress that was on the chopping block. Millennial Action Project and our partners in Congress saved it and expanded it. And that's the leadership I want to scale up in the U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Our next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. You have 90 seconds, Tom.
Thank you, Andre. I'm the only candidate who has been campaigning aggressively on a Green New Deal. And for the simple reason is that we have no choice. Now, there's a lot of people who say we cannot do a Green New Deal because it is aggressive. We have to do it because it is aggressive. But look, our country, we are the ones who put a man on the moon in 8 years. We were able to accomplish the Manhattan Project in less than 10 years. We were able to do it then, we can do it again. So the blueprint to get climate change under control is what I call the blue-green coalition. Blue for labor or manufacturing and green for the environmental movement. Wisconsin is the birthplace, is the home of the modern day environmental movement. Gaylord Nelson. We're also one of the top manufacturing countries in one of the top manufacturing states in the country. So if we're going to succeed with a Green New Deal, that means retooling the environment. You can only retool the environment if you have the jobs to do it. So not only is this the opportunity to create new jobs to be able to get climate to get the climate crisis under control, though, but we can also tie this to labor rights, how we can make these good paying jobs union jobs. And that's connected to another issue. In order for us to do this, we have to match the elusive coalition of labor and environmentalists that too often have divided this country. I'm also the only one supporting getting rid of Line 5 and Line 3.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. The next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. You have 90 seconds, Daryl.
Thank you. And yes, I do believe in the goals of the new Green Deal. And let me just tell you, I had the awesome honor of also serving on the Governor's Task Force for Climate Change with Brother Mandela Barnes, who did a good job running that campaign. But let me just say to you, one of the things that we talked about is the importance of education. We have got to do something better than what we have been doing in focusing on what's happening inside of our schools. We have got to get to the point where we can give our schools support, where our kids are not baking during the summertime and they're freezing during the wintertime, especially in a country that has the most resources in the world. We have to make sure that our kids are fully invested in that way. As the head of emergency management for the state of Wisconsin, I work hand in hand nationally with FEMA on the Building Resistance and Infrastructure in Communities program to support residents here within the state and also throughout the nation. But one of the other things we also have to do is to make sure that we support our farmers who are really suffered as due to climate change. It's really important. We have to make sure that they have the resources that they need to make sure that we continue to have food on our tables. I support clean air. I support the fact clean air and clean water and so forth. But one of the other sides of the coin is within our military.
Thank you, Daryl. Your time is up. I'm sorry. We appreciate that answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy.
So I, like most Democrats on here, agree with the concept of the Green New Deal, agreeing with green energy, and absolutely recognize that it's hugely beneficial to the idea of jobs in Wisconsin. We focus on, here in the campaign, the terms health, education, and opportunity. And health is not just human health, but environmental health. And of course, that affects our health. It affects our opportunities for jobs. And what I didn't hear from anybody is how we're going to actually communicate it to those that don't agree with us, because we have known about the problems of pollution for 60, 70, 80 years. And we've talked about it. We talk about the Green New Deal, and yet we don't manage to connect with 40, 50% of the population. And so I think part of the problem that we have is our messaging and our methods. And it's perhaps time that we look at how we can change that. The simple question, or the simple point of it's the right thing to do, obviously isn't sufficient. So as far as myself, how am I different? Well, I drive a battery-powered Ford Mustang Mach-E. I put geothermal in my home 10 years ago, and we're installing solar panels on the roof of our office. So I lead by example, but I'm also a business owner, and I can explain why it's beneficial to conservatives. And that's something that we need to do right now.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. So the next question we have, it has been submitted by one of our OWR members, Larissa. She's not on right now, but I will ask the question for her, and it regards immigration. Her question states, senators from Wisconsin have failed to take bold leadership in creating pathways to citizenship for the undocumented community at the congressional level, even when the opportunity was given through the Build Back Better and the reconciliation bills. Wisconsin's 2020 elections were determined by Latinx groups advocating for those protections. How will you address this issue if elected? The first candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. For all their bluster, Republicans who use immigration to do dog whistling during campaigns, if you know about this, they never have brought a serious piece of immigration reform to the floor of the Senate or of the Senate or the Congress, because it is part of their business model. So you have an entire political party that keeps in place a broken system because that's how their benefactors make money, millions and billions. So it's on Democrats to be able to lead the charge on immigration reform. We need to have a pathway to we need to have a pathway to citizenship. We also need to pair this with our foreign policy. Our foreign policy rarely focuses on Central America, where this country props up dictators. That is the cause of the migration to the border. And so since we don't speak to that, in fact, we make it worse. That is why we have a problem in the first place. In the state assembly and as the assembly majority leader, we were able to pass immigration reform ourselves. We passed a precursor to the DREAM Act, in which we allowed sons and daughters of undocumented, of those who are undocumented to have access to in-state tuition. So I have the background of working on this as well as looking at this at a way, knowing that in fact that this is a political issue because one party has done that when in fact we know that this is a matter of human rights and that this is not a matter of politics.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, this issue obviously has personal importance to me because my parents were immigrants to this country and have learned from their firsthand perspective of how our immigration system impacted their lives and the life of our family. If there's one theme of our campaign, it's about creating a more dignified life for people. And I believe we need a more dignified immigration system, one that's more humane. And I support the DREAM Act. In fact, one of the chapters of Millennial Action Project passed a state level version of the DREAM Act. And I support a humane and fair pathway to citizenship. But what I really want to talk about is why this issue hasn't had more progress over the last 2 decades. And it gets to this broken business model of politics. Even when there has been a bipartisan consensus on a number of the issues, ranging from the DREAM Act to high skill immigration and attracting entrepreneurs from around the world to here in the US. And yet those policies don't pass because it's financially profitable for politicians and political parties to keep this issue unresolved. That is why we have to change the incentives in our politics if we're going to get bold and humane immigration reform passed. And that is what I'm committed to doing, changing the incentives and taking my experience, my personal experience with the immigration system and bring that to bear through immigration reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. You have 90 seconds, Daryl.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that we must take bold action to, to reform the immigration status. But here's some of the work that I've done in this area. I think it starts with education. And one of the things that I did as an educator was we had a strong partnership with Milwaukee Area Technical College, where we actually supported the dreamers that we had inside of our school, where they could get additional education at MATC. And this is important. As interim superintendent of schools, I also started working with LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. And at the time that I went to Beloit, they had many people had not heard of LULAC. But then we started 3 LULAC chapters, 2 adult chapters and 1 student chapter inside of the high school. This is important because this is where it starts. It starts with our young people. Because if we really say that our children are our future, we must truly invest in them. And this is following up, not only just talking about it, but this is about action and taking action. And the Latinx population is part of the fabric of America, and it's time that we start treating them that way. And we can't ignore the fact that race is an issue. Yes, people are making a lot of money on this issue, but race is an issue. If they can come here and work for us in this country, then we should make sure that we have a pathway to make them whole by legalizing them.
Thank you, Daryl. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thanks so much. It is abundantly clear that we need comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level that fixes the broken system that we're currently dealing with. That means creating a pathway to citizenship and passing the DREAM Act. And we don't have to choose between having a humane immigration system that's both humane and keeps us all safe, because comprehensive and just immigration reform does keep us safe. Now, I've been a leader on this issue even before my time as a legislator. As an organizer with Micah, one of our biggest issues was immigration reform. And I'm proud of that work, and I'm proud to have continued that work as lieutenant governor, regularly meeting with groups like Voces de la Frontera and LULAC to figure out how Wisconsin could be a leader in just comprehensive immigration reform, be it driver's license for undocumented residents, or also in-state tuition for those who graduated school here. In 2013, I joined 53 state and local elected officials from 23 states in partnership to call on Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform legislation. This isn't an issue that's just convenient for the campaign. This is what my focus has been for a long time. And our focus was calling for immigration reform legislation that provided that path to citizenship for undocumented residents, and also kept families, including LGBTQ families, together.
Thank you, Mandela. Appreciate that answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy. You have 90 seconds.
So let's take a page from a name that we don't like to drop, Ronald Reagan, and let's provide amnesty. There are 11 million undocumented immigrants being abused in this country. We can fix that just as easily as he did. And Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden both signed off on it back in the 80s. So let's start there by stopping abusing these folks. And then let's talk immigration overall, because it's a really, really fascinating topic. And it's so important to our society because, well, I just did a 4-minute long video talking about linking climate change, immigration, and Social Security. And here's the simple math. Our birth rate is down to 1.64 kids per woman being born, which means that our population is going to stop growing. Immigration is half of our population growth. And we need it to continue in order to pay for the people that are going to be on Social Security, in order to pay for the baby boomers who are living longer and are going to be on Medicare. And climate change is scaring the 16 to 24-year-olds right now who don't want to have kids. So it's going to get worse. So that means that if we want our society to continue to grow and to expand, that we need to have additional immigration. We need to make it easy. We need to bring people in from all around the world. And we, again, like so many of these topics, we need to explain to conservatives, to business owners, to people that are terrified for whatever reason, why we need additional folks coming to this country.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. You have 90 seconds.
It's not clear what's going on with the video. A lot of them are staying up, Andre. Anyway, thank you very much. I have stood up for the Hispanic community for a long time. About the last 20 years, I have been in the polling places on election day, making sure that the members of the Hispanic community can vote for the people they want to vote for, to put them in office, to get them the immigration reform that we need. Last November, members of the Hispanic community and their elected representatives took exception to the maps proposed to redistrict the state of Wisconsin. I was the only one of the Democratic Senate candidates to show up in front of the statue of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King one night, and 2 nights later in front of the statue of Cesar Chavez on the south side of Milwaukee, 2 days later, to speak up for the United States Constitution, the Voting Rights Act, and the rights of the Hispanic community in Milwaukee and around Wisconsin. I will continue to do so. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and I intend to support it just the way I've supported this community for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rombo. You have 90 seconds, Jeff.
Thank you, Andre. I think we need to recognize what's going on at the border between the United States and Mexico. It's become virtually a military-industrial complex, and that is not something that America needs to be a part of. Right now, immigrants coming into our country need to be greeted by social workers and lawyers, and not just military officials and police. While they can remain involved, we need a variety of services so that immigrants can come into our country and become proactive members of our society and proactive members of our economy. In my work from day to day, I work with the police, the law enforcement, and many other members of our community. And we work together to try and help people who are experiencing mental health crises from ending up in jail, from ending up in institutions. And that's the kind of cooperation I'm talking about, is that different members of the community working together to resolve problems. We are not handing over our immigration issues to the military. That is not the solution, and that is not something civil, and that is not something this campaign stands for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, we have another member question, and our member, Rich Mcgowan, is on, and he will ask the question to the candidates, and then we'll proceed from there.
Hey, Andre, do you want me to introduce myself, Andre?
Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Mcgowan. I'm a medical doctor, a physician in Madison, and I'm a member of our Wisconsin Revolution on the state board and an advocate for single-payer healthcare. So this is my question. During the greatest pandemic in modern American history, Americans have suffered more than their counterparts in other industrialized countries because we are the only ones who do not guarantee healthcare as a human right. For decades, our government has maintained an enormously wasteful, bureaucratic, and dysfunctional system that enriches the CEOs and shareholders of private health insurance and pharmaceutical companies without delivering the healthcare that we all pay for. It is long past time that the one stakeholder in American healthcare that matters most, the American public, becomes the focus of healthcare in this country. Will you vigorously support Medicare for all so that all Americans are guaranteed healthcare without having to face the preventable tragedies of medical bankruptcy, premature death, and widening healthcare disparities? And thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. So the first candidate to answer this question will be Jeff Rumbaugh. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Andre. This campaign does, in fact, support a single-payer healthcare system. And we have to understand that the U.S. healthcare system is by far the most complicated healthcare system in the world. We are the most advanced civilization nation in the country, and we do not provide health care for our citizens, and that is a mistake. The prescription drug companies are charging drug prices in the US which are among the highest in the entire world. This campaign is looking for a healthcare system that is not going to deny people coverage for pre-existing conditions. We need to make sure that all Americans are covered. And we need to allow Medicare to negotiate prices with drug companies directly so that they are affordable for our citizens. No one should go bankrupt trying to pay for their medical bills. None of our seniors should have to cut their pills in half just to make it until they can afford more. This is ridiculous, and this country can do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. The next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. And yes, I would support the Medicare for all. This is a critical issue. And I tell you, when you asked that question, I thought about my mother, who's over 80 years old, who has to make a decision of whether or not to pay her bills or buy the medicine that she needs to survive. And this is not the type of America that I envision for myself, my mother, or for any other American, especially our senior citizens. We have to make sure that we can guarantee healthcare and better healthcare for everyone. So yes, I would definitely work to make sure that all Americans are covered. And we also can't ignore the fact that this is, especially in this age of COVID, what we've seen some of the worst conditions manifested itself, especially in some of our disenfranchised areas in our Black, brown communities, and actually in some of these areas that serve a lot of our poor whites. So we have to make sure that we're treating people with the respect that they have earned, and we have to make sure that we have great medical coverage for everybody. And this includes mental health care as well. And we just can't throw our poor people to the side because a rising tide lifts us all. Thanks.
Thank you, Daryl. We appreciate the question or the answer. The next candidate to answer this question will be Tom Nelson. You have 90 seconds, Tom.
Not only do I support Medicare for all, but it has been a very big part of this campaign. And let me say this. Let's be very clear. I support Medicare for all. I do not support just a pathway to Medicare for all. I don't bury it in one sentence on page 10 on a supposed economic plan. I have been doing this and I've been consistent on that. And for me, it's personal. It's personal because my wife had cancer and she's a survivor, and my mom had cancer. What they had in common is they had access to good health insurance. 30 million Americans cannot say that. Millions more do not have enough health insurance. We have to stop nibbling around the edges of this monster that continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Keep in mind too, this is Russ Feingold's seat. One of his top issues was single payer. He tried doing it 30 years ago. We have to carry on that legacy. As county executive, I've seen firsthand how the for-profit system has in many ways really messed up the response to COVID because we have not had a consistent message. What you do have is you have competition where healthcare systems don't even trade information on how many ventilators they have. Counties, half of the county budget is for HHS, Health and Human Services. And a lot of that is because we don't have enough money invested in preventative care. We don't have enough preventative care because people are not insured. This will actually save taxpayer dollar. We're talking about property tax relief supporting Medicare for all.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy. Adam, you have 90 seconds.
I could talk about this for 90 hours. I'm in a master's in economics program right now, and I'm actually taking a class called Economics of Healthcare. So I'm having a fabulous experience learning about the economics of health, of healthcare, and of health insurance. And last night, I actually had a call with the Physicians for National Health program, which is a group that started in 1987, trying to pass legislation associated with single payer. And one of the questions they asked is, what can we do better? What can we do differently? Because they've been trying to do it since 1987. So what are we missing? And I think it's kind of like the environmental issue. How do we talk about it? Because people have brought up a number of different topics. 20% of GDP in the United States goes towards healthcare. 20%, $1 out of every 5 that gets spent is healthcare. 60% of bankruptcies are associated with medical bills. It's ridiculous. And so it becomes a question of economics and explaining the economics, explaining that we will actually, if we do this right, if we had done the ACA, I don't want to say if we'd done the ACA right, because the GOP certainly made it challenging, but if they had, sorry, somebody threw a note up there and it distracted me. If we had, I'll use Wisconsin as a quick example, because we're not in the exchange, which the GOP got out of, and because we didn't take the money from the federal government, our stuff was ineffective. The ACA was ineffective. That was a mistake. The ACA was designed to be a starting point, and because of how it was built in, it didn't work well. We can absolutely do this and should.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate the answer.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. Peter, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much for the question, Doctor. I support universal health care as a basic right for all Americans. Frequently, when we talk about this, we focus too much on the long-term costs. There's a current cost which we have to pay attention to, and I will as a United States Senator. As I promised a group up in Siren in northwestern Wisconsin this summer, the first bill I introduce will be a bill to stop the use of medical debt to adversely affect credit ratings. Right now, a family can very easily go $50,000 into debt, broken arm, broken leg, a couple of ear infections, and you're severely underwater. It goes on your credit rating. You can't get a new used car if you need one, a new car, a new house. You got to get to work. You can't get transportation. There are some jobs you cannot hold merely because you have medical debt and because we are not ensuring universal health care as a basic right for all Americans. We can stop the use, cut off the use of medical debt to adversely affect credit ratings by federal legislation. It's the first bill I'm going to introduce when I'm a United States Senator. I would like to thank you for your support. Look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. That issue, universal health care, has been at the top of my website, Pakarski4Wisconsin.com, since I started running. Please visit the site, Pakarski4Wisconsin.com. Take a look for yourself. Let us know what you think about the issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 90 seconds, Steve.
Thank you for the question. Well, I know what it feels like to lose your healthcare. I know what it feels like to go on to Cobra. In fact, I had to do that to run in this race right now. And I'm honest about that because I want to share with people the real experience of running for office. I believe healthcare is a human right. And what I hope to add to this conversation is that guaranteed healthcare can be a great boost for providing more dignified forms of work in our economy. Right now, there's a huge issue with what's called job lock, where workers get stuck working for often these big corporations because that's their ticket to healthcare, not only for themselves, but also for their families. So I think the way that we open up the freedom of people to be able to pursue more dignified work, fulfilling work, things that is purposeful for them, is by guaranteeing healthcare. And I believe we need a modern, comprehensive Medicare like insurance plan available to all Americans from cradle to grave. And the reason why I say that is because there are way too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to healthcare, and all these people trying to take little cuts of the process. And then it becomes even complicated often just to sign up. And that is a huge problem. And so I think this is the quickest and most efficient way to guarantee healthcare for all Americans. And it will have the added boost of creating a more dignified economy. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. Mandela, you have 90 seconds.
All right. Yes, I do support Medicare for all because in the richest country in the world, nobody should go bankrupt because of their medical bills. I accumulated a lot of debt myself about a decade ago. And when I travel across the state, people from all walks of life tell me that affordable health care is a major struggle for them, or a lack of access to it, from parents trying to provide health care for their families to small business owners who are struggling to be able to afford healthcare benefits either for themselves or for the people they employ. Now, we need America on the path to universal healthcare with lower costs and high quality coverage, and Medicare for all is the quickest way for us to get there. It's exactly why I included in my plan to support small businesses that we released this week. But we all know that unfortunately, it won't happen overnight. And we have to make sure that we can help people in the meantime so they don't continue to slip through the cracks. Our fight for better healthcare has to include allowing the federal government to negotiate lower drug prices and lowering the Medicare age of eligibility to 50 years old, like Tammy Baldwin proposed. And also support legislation proposed by Senator Baldwin that would close the healthcare coverage gap in states like Wisconsin that have yet to expand Medicaid, which will ensure lower prices, better healthcare, and better access to care in rural communities. We have to take as many approaches as possible to make sure that people do not have to deal with the struggle of not being able to see a doctor if they get sick, or the idea that they may get strapped with a surprise bill that sends them into bankruptcy.
Thank you, Mandela. Appreciate the answer. So our next question revolves around strategy. So here's the question. Some U.S. senators have consistently stayed in the headlines for using their position to individually stall or stop progressive policy, namely Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. They've used their power and withheld their votes, even when doing so is unpopular to a vast majority of Democrats and liberals. Should the situation arise, would you as a senator be willing to use your position and withhold your vote to help ensure the passage of popular progressive policies like a Medicare for all system? The first candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alcar. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I've said from the beginning of this campaign that the key metric of success of a legislator, not a telemarketer like most members of Congress, but a legislator, is not introducing bills. It's certainly not introducing messaging bills that are more about posturing than about results. It's about bills passed that respond to specific needs of Wisconsinites. That is the metric you can use to evaluate me. And that's why I will keep every option on the table, including withholding my vote on key issues, to be able to get things done. And that is, I think, a key differentiation for my candidacy here. I've had the most experience passing legislation through Congress. Our affiliated congressional caucus introduced 200 bills through Congress that are bipartisan, 31 of which were passed and signed into law. So that's the experience I want to bring to bear. And I think as a U.S. Senator, you have convening power. You have the ability to use your platform to move an issue. And that's another failure of imagination I see among so many members of Congress. They assume everything is static, that members can never move. I believe in the politics of persuasion, and I'll keep working at it, talking to anyone in the U.S. Senate to move our agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rumbaugh. You have 90 seconds.
It's unfortunate that individuals like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sistema hold such power that just an individual or two individuals can suddenly halt progress in fighting the greatest issue of our lifetimes, climate change. No single individual or two individuals should be allowed to stop things of that nature. Such huge issues that one person standing in the way of for financial-based reasons, like being tied to the coal industry. This campaign is about being comfortable doing what's right. And if that means withholding our vote to stand up for certain legislation like Medicare for all, then that's something we're not afraid to do. We also believe it's important to work across the aisle. Sometimes certain things, certain provisions in bills may not be something that we want to see, but some parts of it may be something we do want to see. So we can look towards cooperation, but we will also stand off in something that we don't believe in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. Mandela, you have 90 seconds.
Thanks a lot. And first of all, we mentioned Manchin and Sinema, and we have to abolish the filibuster so that no one lawmaker has the power to block the legislation that will make people's lives better. In the Senate, it is always going to be about putting the people of Wisconsin first every single time, no matter what. Now, whether that means bucking the special interests or bucking my party at times, if need be, I'll always make the decision that does the most good for the people that I represent. And I also believe that working together with different stakeholders to make sure that we're actually able to pass legislation that can have a direct impact on people's lives. That's what I did as a legislator. It's what I did as an organizer. It's what I'm doing currently as lieutenant governor. Again, I can mention the task force because that's where we brought together the climate activists. We even brought together utility companies, labor unions, small businesses, large businesses, and farmers to address this crisis head on by having honest discussion and robust dialogue to get us to the place that we needed to be, recognizing all the input that we needed from stakeholders to develop comprehensive solutions that truly answer the question, that truly answer the call and get the job done and deliver for people of the state of Wisconsin. And that's what I intend to do in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Mandela. The next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. Tom, you have 90 seconds.
Thanks, Andre. In one word, absolutely. What is so frustrating is that Democrats, and in particular progressives, are so timid. When it comes to using your vote in a strategic manner, you know what? Republicans do it all the time, but Democrats are too timid to do it. We've seen so many examples where Democrats have had opportunities to stop legislation, and yet bad legislation put good legislation pad instead you just hear the words Manchin Sinema, but you never hear about the the progressive counterpart. When I go to Washington, I'm not just going to be a reliable vote. I'm not just going to say, check a box and say universal care. That sounds good, but I will use my vote to do everything I can, all options on the table, all tools at my disposal to do what I can to pass a Green New Deal, to stop things like Line 5 and Line 3, and yes, to pass Medicare for all, because I'm tired of nibbling around the edges of a monster that gets larger and larger. Someone has to put their foot down and say no more. And Medicare for all is one of those issues. Using different options on the table, that's been my public service. Everything from conducting a sit-in on the floor of the state assembly when Democrats and Republicans couldn't pass a budget, sending a petition drive to save senior care and going to Washington to save it, and working with people like Russ Feingold and Herb Cole. And I'm also the only one who can point to concrete examples as county executive working at the local level to accomplish those things.
Thank you, Tom. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy. Adam, you have 90 seconds.
Awesome. So a friend of my wife's, when we got engaged, called her up and said, you know, he was the president of the chess team in high school for 3 years, right? Strategy is kind of my jam. I've even got a few seconds on ESPN playing in the World Series of Poker. Look me up, I'm not bad. And I study game theory. I actually do videos on it. We're over on TikTok, and I know that's kind of unusual for a politician to be over there, but I did a series talking about game theory and the GOP tax cuts recently, the 2017 tax cuts, that was viewed 500,000 times. And that was with no advertising, which tells us that people are actually interested in how strategy works. And so I think it's time that we actually start talking strategy with folks publicly, very, very publicly. So with the Mansion and Cinema, part of the problem, as far as I was concerned, is that we never saw from them why they didn't agree with the bills, why they refused to play. So my plan, let's approach their constituents. Let's put that out there. Let's have these conversations incredibly publicly, which we can do because we all have these. And let's change how the strategy works. Then we can actually accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Thank you, Adam. Our next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. You have 90 seconds, Peter.
Thank you very much. I'm hearing a lot of glib suggestions about abolishing the filibuster and 100% clean energy by 2030 without any explanation of how that's going to happen in reality. I am willing to take unpopular positions on behalf of the people of the state of Wisconsin, and as a United States Senator, which is a federal office, on behalf of the people of the United States of America. I've done it for a fairly long period of time. I'm willing to do it again. And I think under certain circumstances, it has to be done. I'm also willing to work across party lines to get stuff done for the people of this state and this country. And I think we have to pay attention to that and try and work in that direction. Some of the proposals being made seem to indicate a lack of understanding of what's happening or what the possibilities are in the Senate and the House, and I take exception to that. The bottom line is I'm willing to ask the hard questions that have to be asked in a lot of different areas, whether it's climate change or universal health care or workers' rights and unions' rights or sustainable agriculture or ending systemic racism or providing for our veterans when people are ignoring them. Those are the issues on my campaign website. They've been there since we started, and I intend to keep on pushing them. And I thank you for listening tonight and ask you for your support. Hit the website, let us know what you think in addition we ought to say about the priorities, and if there are additional priorities you want added to that website, pakarskiforwisconsin.com. Thanks very much, Andre. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. The next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. Daryl, you have 90 seconds.
Thanks for the question. And yes, I'll be totally transparent. Yes, I would use my valued vote to make a difference on behalf of the citizens of Wisconsin. But as Democrats, we have to be more aggressive on abolishing the filibuster to really get things to get things done. We've seen many times and heard from many on the Republican side of how aggressive they are. And it appears that we are the more timid party. And as your United States Senator, I would be one that would go fight tooth and nail to work to abolish that filibuster so we can get things done on behalf of the people. The political posturing, really has to stop. And that's easier said than done. But yes, I would hold my vote to make sure that we get things done on behalf of our people. And this is so important because so many times on this campaign trail, we see people that say one thing in front of the camera, but do something totally different in closed session, as we've seen with the voting rights bill. I think my core values, if it's not illegal or moral or unethical, we will work together, and we have to work on both sides of the aisle. But I am one who would do what is right for the people of Wisconsin and for the people of this nation. I do believe in working on both sides of the aisle and have worked with people on both sides of the aisle. And I do realize that, I won't ever get in bed, if you will, with the devil, but sometimes you have to sit at the foot of the bed and have a conversation to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate the answers. So now we will be going into the 60-second questions. So the first question is about social justice. The Democratic Party claims to be in favor of legalization of marijuana. However, there has been little to no action to legalize it nationwide. If elected, what would you do to make the legalization of marijuana a top priority in the next session? The first candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. So you're right back up, Daryl.
Thank you for that question again. I believe the question was around legalizing our marijuana. I believe that that's important that we do that. But I also think it's important that we look at how at other issues that's related to that. I think it's important that we legalize marijuana for medicinal purposes, and so that we can provide and use those resources to provide treatment and also better health care for our citizens. But I also think on the other side of the coin this is such a critical issue for many of our schools across the nation, because I do believe that it would cause tremendous issues inside of our schools. If you can imagine, many of our schools, our kids who are 18 years old or older coming to school smelling like marijuana or using marijuana, and how that can impact the school environment. So while I support the legalization of marijuana, I think we should do so with, we should bring people to the table, a diverse group of people to the table, to see how that we can best make sure that legalizing it is not impacting our educational system.
Thank you, Daryl. The next candidate to answer this question is Adam Murphy. Adam, you have 60 seconds.
Okay, ready? Go. So yes, legalize it. Yes, expunge records from everybody, the same way that Illinois has done, because it's incredibly dangerous and problematic for citizens. It leads to job problems. It leads to family problems. So let's take care of that. We need to tax it at the federal level as well as at the state level. At the state level, what the federal level needs to, or what the feds need to do, is tell the states that a certain portion of the revenue that they gain from taxes has to go towards rehabilitation, because that is absolutely an issue. And then at the federal level, what we do is we turn around and we incorporate some of that taxes and dedicate it directly to research, which goes to the CDC and the NIH in order to take advantage of the medicinal benefits that we're not capable currently of researching. There is so much more to talk about on this topic, but that is just a really quick hit of what needs to be done. Finally, one last thing. The other reason that we need it done at the federal level is because as it's become a business across the United States, it's purely a cash business because of the illegal nature of it and the banking. So we have to change that so that it can actually become business and allow Wisconsin farmers to grow weed.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that. The next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. Tom, you have 60 seconds.
Yes, and there's three parts: a racial justice issue, an economic issue, and is eminently doable. This is a racial justice issue because there's a disproportionate people of color who are in jail because of marijuana. Number two, we are losing out on millions. Michigan and Illinois combined $600 million in tax revenue from the sales. Third, it is eminently doable because there's both an economic argument and there's a racial justice argument. So Democrats and Republicans can come together and support that. And that's what I've done as Outagamie County executive, bringing Democrats and Republicans together. The only way that I can get elected and reelected 3 times in Red County is if I can appeal to Republicans and Democrats and independents and to get things done. And my record speaks for itself.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. Peter, you have 60 seconds.
What I would do as a senator to support this is to vote for it, vote to legalize it, regulate it, and tax it, to remove cannabis from Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, and reevaluate the sentences for those doing time, especially nonviolent offenders for doing time for having some cannabis in their possession. That's what I would do. I think we've got to do it now and address. Once that's done, legalized, regulated, taxed, it can be used in accord with law for any purpose. That's what I would do as your senator.
Thank you, Peter. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. Mandela, you have 60 seconds.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, our administration has been leading the fight for legalized marijuana in Wisconsin. Is the fight that I was proud to be a part of in the state legislature. And legalizing marijuana is an incredible economic opportunity for the state. I mean, think about how many people are driving to Illinois every day because marijuana sales have topped $1 billion. Those are our dollars that are funding industries in the state of Illinois. We deserve that tax revenue and the economic benefit that comes along with it right here in Wisconsin. And again, it's also critical to addressing the injustice that has too many Black and brown people languishing in prison for something that's legal in 18 states. The arrest disparity, I want to say, is 5 to 1 if you are Black versus white counterparts in the state of Wisconsin, despite similar usage. This is incredibly frustrating. That's why it's an issue that I'm proud to have taken a lead on. Now, I'm incredibly excited at the opportunity to take that fight to the U.S. Senate. And also, I want to mention that as marijuana becomes legal, people who have had to come in contact with the criminal justice system should also have first dibs at employment in the industry.
Thank you, Mandela. Appreciate your answer. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rombo. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. I think we need to remember just quickly is how entrenched our society is in alcohol. Every grocery store, every mini mart, there's alcohol for sale. And alcohol lobbyists have been fighting to keep marijuana illegal to maintain their grip on the economy. We believe that, yes, marijuana should be made legal across the country. At the federal level, we believe that convicts who have been serving time for marijuana possession should be released and have their records expunged. And we need to remember something else about it, is that the fibrous stalks of the marijuana plant can be used to create paper. It takes decades for trees to grow. So not only can we provide something that a majority of the American people have said they are in favor of, the plant has multi-uses, and those are something we should take advantage of in addition to the tax revenue that legalized marijuana would bring us.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 60 seconds, Steve.
I'm very optimistic about this issue and the progress we're going to be able to make over the next few years because we're seeing this incredible alignment between the left and right. And I first saw it back in 2014. The first state to legalize marijuana was the state of Colorado, and it was a bill authored by my organization, Millennial Action Project's co-chair there. That bill has become the model, not only for this nation, for other states that are embracing marijuana legalization, but also countries around the world. In fact, this gentleman, he often jokes, man, I wish I'd get invited to talk about something other than pot. And so the reason we're getting so much, and that bill was bipartisan, by the way, and we're getting this agreement because the war on drugs needs to end. Both Democrats and Republicans, progressives, conservatives, libertarians are coming together in agreement that the war on drugs has been costly in terms of human lives. It's been costly in terms of dollars, and that's why we're going to end it. And I hope to scale that up in the U.S. Senate as someone who can actually seize these opportunities and bring left and right and unlikely bedfellows together. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. So we're coming up on our last question, and it revolves around corruption. It is a well-known fact that members of Congress receive confidential information that can affect the value of stocks. As a result, many members of Congress decide what stocks to invest or divest from based on their confidential knowledge. This is clearly an unethical practice. So the question is, do you support a ban on all elected officials and their immediate family members from stock trading? Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer this question. Adam, you are first.
There we go. Yes, absolutely. This is so simple. I don't know why it hasn't been done before. Well, we know why it hasn't been done before, right? People are making millions of dollars. So yeah, there's absolutely no reason that members of Congress should be trading stocks. I think we should not only stop it, but if we find that it happens, that they should be penalized by being removed from Congress. It's really that simple. We're not there to make money, or at least we certainly shouldn't be.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Stephen Alakar. You have 60 seconds.
In my introduction, I talked about the BS I saw in Washington, and this is part of it. I've seen members of Congress in committee hearings on their iPad trading literally millions of dollars. So years ago, I called for banning stock trading by members of Congress. And this is part of our agenda to change the business model of politics and rebuild trust. I mean, think about how this practice erodes trust in government. And you just wonder if these members are on the level. And I can't believe that this has gone on as long as it has. I support the Mark Kelly, John Ossoff bill to end this practice. And I think that members of Congress should be held accountable. And there should be much more transparency about, even retroactively, when members of Congress made some of these deals. And this is the height of why Congress has become so divorced from reality and why Congress has usually a 20 to 25% approval rating. I'll lead on this issue, and this is a top part of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next candidate to answer this question is Mandela Barnes. Mandela, you have 60 seconds.
I absolutely support banning members of Congress from trading individual stocks. In fact, I was the first candidate in this race to release a plan that included just that, because we shouldn't allow people in charge of regulating industries to make money off of those same industries. It is the most insider of insider trading. It is stopping us from seeing the progress that we need to see in terms of healthcare, in terms of access to life-saving medications that people can hardly afford, in any other industries, especially when it comes to gun violence prevention. When people are allowed to trade stocks, there is a profit motive that wins every time, and the people of this country lose. And people of Wisconsin find themselves on losing end of this deal every single time. So yes, absolutely support banning members of Congress from trading individual stocks.
Thank you, Mandela. The next candidate to answer this question is Jeff Rombo. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Andre. Put it simply, yes, we are against the trading of stocks by members of Congress, but we need to remember that they're helping shape economic policy, and they should not be involved in dictating the market or obtaining market information and making decisions that are unknown to the American public and are far from transparent. I should say that For over 20 years now, I have been a real public servant. I have been working with some amazing people, and what we do is working for the passion and not the paycheck. So you can see throughout my career that I have not been chasing the dollar, and I will not approve of Congress trading stocks to chase the dollar.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. The next candidate to answer this question is Tom Nelson. Tom, you have 60 seconds.
I'm proud to be leading on this issue, not just in this particular race, but also nationally. And we had a petition drive, and I've also been calling out not just Republicans, but Democrats, including Speaker Pelosi, as well as Majority Leader Schumer, calling on immediate action on this. Congressmen shouldn't be doing it. Members of Congress and their families shouldn't be doing this. I mean, they need to be focusing on their job. They're not a Bud Fox or a Gordon Gekko that are there to try to profit. I'm there for the people. I'm not here to improve my stock portfolio. In fact, I don't trade stocks at all. I've got mutual funds and CDs, and that's probably the solution right there, is why these members of Congress and their families can't put them to CDs and mutual funds like the rest of us. And that's another example of just how checked out they are. I propose what I call the Packer rule, which means just like Packer stock, you can't trade Packer stock. We should do the same rule for all members of Congress.
Thank you, Tom. The next candidate to answer this question is Peter Picarski. Peter, you have 60 seconds.
Yes, I support the ban. Perhaps ought to go farther than Tom's talking about. There should be a ban on members of Congress being in the markets at all. If they have spare money, they can put it in U.S. Treasury bills of some type. I've done a lot of securities fraud litigation. The principle in securities fraud is that you cannot trade on inside information, non-public information, and what members of Congress have access to as they litigate, and as some of the top staffers have access to, is something that certainly looks like non-public information. They should not be trading. Members of Congress should not be in the markets at all. And that's my position. I will support it. And yes, I support stopping trading individual stocks, and it should go much farther than that.
Thank you, Peter. The next candidate to answer this question is Daryl Williams. Daryl, you have 60 seconds.
Hey, thanks for the question. And yes, I definitely would support the ban on members of Congress trading stocks. You know, this is just another example of how people get rich off the people. And I think as Democrats, we should be more aggressive on this issue and make this make this issue like a household name. I think many people who are on this call probably haven't even heard of this before, but it's a major issue. But this is what happens when people are bought and paid for by big business. But I believe we should be transparent on this issue, and those who continue should be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. I really appreciate it. So that does conclude all the questions that we have for the candidates. We will now be entering the phase for final remarks. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for final remarks. Again, you will be warned when you have 15 seconds left, and then we will go on to the next candidate. The first candidate to do their final remarks is Peter Pakarski. Peter, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks very much. By education, training, and experience, I am seriously qualified to shred Ron Johnson's policies, whether during the campaign, which I intend to do, or on a debate stage, and to represent all the people of Wisconsin on the many critical, complicated, technical, and legal issues we face at home, in cyberspace, national security, and foreign affairs. I mentioned earlier that filed a lawsuit to protect democracy in this state. Couldn't get any of the other candidates to join in. Let me explain to you what's at issue. The Wisconsin Constitution guarantees a secret ballot because of a statute subordinate to the Constitution. When absentee ballots are centrally counted, and there were about 600,000 of them in November of 2020, identifying information must be put on the ballot. It's no longer secret. If a motion were made to throw those ballots out, the Democratic margin on those ballots which come from 39 municipalities, including the city of Milwaukee. Democratic margin was 112,000 votes. Let me make it clear that when the voters of Wisconsin voted, they gave the electoral votes to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They were certified to have won by 20,000 votes. The Democratic margin on those votes, which could have been tossed out, is 112,000. When Tony and Mandela won in 2018, their margin was 29,000. If they had lost 112,000, they wouldn't be in office now either. The only way to address this is to go to court and get the courts to declare the statute unconstitutional, or else to say that those ballots are totally secret, which will prevent a Republican coming in after the 2024 presidential election, if it's close, and moving to toss those ballots out, and having 4 members of the Wisconsin Supreme Court toss them out back. And the only appeal is to the U.S. Supreme Court. Same thing could happen this fall. 4 justices of the Wisconsin court, unless somebody takes action, could decide for themselves who the governor, attorney general, senator, state treasurer would be. So I've asked everybody to join in this, sent them an invitation. The invitation's on the Twitter page. It's all on my website. So far, I am the only one to step up to the plate to protect our democracy. Other people are talking about it. I'm actually doing it. And I would appreciate your support and interest in this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. The next candidate for closing remarks is Tom Nelson. Tom, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you to Our Revolution for having this forum. Look, my story is a story that hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites have. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Little Chute, Wisconsin, population 7,907. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood called Carolyn Drive. All the dads on that block worked at paper mills, except for my dad, who I like to say wore the white collar, who was a Lutheran pastor. So I learned 2 very important lessons growing up. Number 1, the importance of serving your community. And number 2, in time, knowing that there are a lot of people like the working families, union families on Carolyn Drive who work hard, play by the rules, pay their taxes, but just can't get ahead because too much power and too much money is concentrated in just a couple of hands. As a county executive, as a member of the state assembly, I had what is called a Carolyn Drive litmus test, which simply means if a piece of legislation or service was good for the people of Carolyn Drive, the farm families in Western Wisconsin, like my aunt and uncle, I would support that. I have 3 parts: economic security, health security, and climate change. Those are absolutely essential. Climate change is an existential crisis. I'm the only one who's been campaigning hard on Green New Deal, including getting rid of Line 3 and Line 5, reining in on factory farms like those in Burnett County. And finally, I just want to say this, is that we need to have someone who is a proven progressive, who has a clear vision, who consistently stands on issues, who does not hide from the media or refuses to talk about or explain their flip-flopping on issues. We need to have a candidate who's a true progressive, who's from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, as Paul Wellstone used to say, and will champion these issues and not just be a reliable vote. And we've got to win this. We've got to win this seat, because this seat can determine control of the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. The next candidate to speak on closing remarks is Mandela Barnes. Mandela, you have 2 minutes.
Well, there's been a whole lot said tonight. I'm really excited to have a chance to talk to everybody. And what I hope that you all take away from the conversation is that I'm running for the U.S. Senate to work for you, to build opportunity for everybody across this state, regardless of where you're from, regardless of your zip code. Because there's a lot of people in Congress who are only looking out for the wealthy and the well-connected and their donors. But who's looking out for the young people who've had the deck stacked against them, who are saddled with student loan debt and worried about the climate crisis? Who's looking out for people in the middle class who struggle as life gets more expensive, but wages stay flat? Who's looking out for the communities that haven't been invested in, that have been neglected, for the people who don't get a fair shot? That's exactly why I'm running for the U.S. Senate, to be a voice for the families just like mine and for the people just like us, to stand up against the special interests and the corporate donors that make sure that Congress delivers only for the wealthy while the rest of us get left in the dust. It's the work that I've been doing since I was an interfaith community organizer back in my hometown of Milwaukee, working on issues ranging from criminal justice reform to economic opportunity. It's the work that I did during my years in the state legislature. And it's the work I'm proud to do as your lieutenant governor. And with your support, it's the work that I do as your U.S. Senator. because we don't have to accept the world that it is. I believe that better is possible. And that's exactly what I'm fighting for. I know you believe it too. It's exactly why you're here today. Let's get this done.
Thank you, Mandela. The next candidate for closing remarks is Stephen Alacara. You have 2 minutes, Stephen.
Hey, thank you so much, Andre. Thanks to everyone with Our Revolution. Really an honor to be with you, to share our ideas. And really, this is what our campaign is all about. Being more open, being more collaborative. We want to hear from you. And look, at the end of the day, my question I would leave with all of you is, how many of you feel satisfied with the options presented in traditional establishment politics today? I'm certainly not satisfied, and that's why I'm running in this race. I believe we need a radically different kind of politics to solve the scale of the problems we have. That's what the political revolution is all about. And I will transform American politics, not by myself, but by mobilizing a movement across Wisconsin and ultimately across this nation in the U.S. Senate. There are 3 things I hope you take away from this. One is, I've been speaking the same message for the last 10 years since I've been in politics. You can look it up and see that consistency. I didn't invent this message just for the sake of this campaign. The second thing is, as you can hear from my remarks today, I'm not just speaking rehearsed partisan talking points. I have an independent-minded approach to doing politics, and I think that's key to actually our ability to attract independents into our coalition. And the final thing I'll share is, I know a lot of what I talk about can on its face sound idealistic. You might wonder, is that really possible? And I feel that too sometimes, because there's so much cynicism out there. But what I would just close with is, we're already doing it. This is a movement we've been building for a decade. And I believe the style of politics that we've been practicing and building through our network of 2,000 young elected officials with Millennial Action Project is the most practical way to make change, and it's the right thing to do. So I ask you to join our movement, StephenAlikar.com, and let's shock the world and make history in this election. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next candidate for closing remarks is Adam Murphy. Adam, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Andre. I've appreciated this opportunity, and I had appreciated chatting with you earlier about what OWR is doing. It's an awesome experience. And to the rest of the candidates, it is always eye-opening and fun to hear what you guys have to say. I always learn a little something. So there were a lot of policy questions, and they're important. But I believe that what's important is to know how people make the decisions, why they make the decisions. And that's very much what I'm trying to share with this campaign. We talk about listen, learn, and share, and sometimes teach. And from a policy standpoint, we talk about health, education, and opportunity. And I said earlier, health references everything health related, not just our personal health, but our environmental health, our mental health. Education, of course, we really didn't delve into on this one. We call it K-16 because I think it's vitally important. And both of those lead to opportunity. And opportunity in my book is both jobs as well as business, because I'm a small business owner. And I think understanding the connection between business and jobs is critically important. So what I would like to leave you with is, I spend a tremendous amount of time talking with people, asking them questions, literally hundreds every week. There are about 100 people watching this right now. I would love to hear from you. Murphy4WI.com is the website. Murphy4WI is all the social medias, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. And I'm also told that some of you were kind of creeped out by the painting behind me. I apologize, it's fabulous in person. So let's talk about that as well. Ask me your questions. I will be happy to answer them. And let's revolutionize politics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. The next candidate for final remarks is Daryl Williams. Daryl, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening, and thank everybody for tuning in to watch this forum tonight, and thank you for OWR for hosting it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really just a country boy from Abbeville, Mississippi. I grew up very poor, picking cotton in the backwoods of Mississippi. I know the value of hard work. It was tough on my mother trying to raise 6 kids off of $3.35 an hour. I understand what it's like and how important it is to have a family supporting job. When I came here as an educator, I taught here and served as an administrator for 26 years in education and served 29 years, 2 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been humbled to serve you as emergency manager for the state of Wisconsin, where I traveled all over this state. This is not all about me. This is more about you. This is more about what you value and what qualifications and who you value in this position. I'm running for every veteran who served us, and now it's time for us to serve them. I'm running for every parent who wants a fair wage and a good paying job and wants more jobs here. I'm running for all of our students, every teacher who wants benefits and fair pay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you value someone with the knowledge, experience, and skills in the areas that's most critical to us at this time, the education of our kids, homeland security, you would think that you would want somebody at that table in the U.S. Senate seat who has been there, done that, and will continue to do the work on behalf of the people. I'm not just running, trying to make another name for myself. Most people would say 26 years in education, 29 years of military service. Those are 2 careers within itself. I'm not running for me. I'm running for you. And there's not another candidate that's on this panel with the knowledge, experience, and background that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. The last candidate for closing remarks is Jeff Rombo. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you again to our Wisconsin Revolution and all your members for hosting this. Thank you to the other candidates, and thank you, Dr. Williams, for your service to our country. This campaign believes in a priority of voting rights. Nothing can get accomplished before Americans have the right to vote, have a legal and legitimate right to vote, one that's protected. How are we going to do that? Our high school seniors are going to receive their diploma and become automatically registered to vote upon graduation. Americans are going to become automatically registered to vote when they receive or renew their driver's licenses. Those are real solutions. We need to fight racism. This campaign feels very strongly that racism is the key divider in our nation, and our public schools can provide a curriculum for tomorrow that offers a breadth of writers and authors from Native Americans, Asian Americans, African Americans, to create understanding and empathy in our society. I want you to remember that I've been a public servant throughout my career. I would like to address the real issues, and we are tired of the fake. The days of fake are over with our campaign. We ask for your support, and I ask that you remember that I am in this for the passion and not the paycheck. It's Jeff Rumbaugh for Senate.com, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the candidates to come here today to answer these questions. We really do want to get down to the policy level, because that's what matters at the end of the day. And whoever wins this primary, I hope that that person advocates and fights for the policies that will help uplift the working people of Wisconsin. We hope that those viewing receive vital information about the candidates and the policies that they stand for. We encourage you to visit their websites and learn more about them. As for our Wisconsin Revolutions, please stay connected with us. You can find us on social media at our Wisconsin Rev on all our social media pages. And also, if you would like to, please donate to our organization. We have a full-time staff. We work extremely hard to put on events like this and also continue to fight for progressive policies. So if you go to ourwisconsinrev.com, you can donate to us there and also take action with us. Because it doesn't just take a candidate, it takes a movement to push these policies. So we would love for you guys to join our organization and be a part of it, and also join us in the revolution. So again, thank you to the candidates and to the people who stopped in and viewed and watched with us. You guys have a great night, and let's have a respectful and great primary in the next few months. Bye, everyone.
Have a fabulous night, everyone.